Just for the record, is it necessary for anybody to do a sign-in in the chat box just to identify themselves if they want to, like we would at a normal open house?
Well, actually, I'm not sure that we enabled the chat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we'll just ask people to raise their hand.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate y'all's time. You are here to learn a little bit about our hike and bike trail plan and what we're calling our 2020 update. So appreciate again your time today. There we go. Okay, so I just want to go through our agenda today. And before we get started on the presentation and information, I want to go ahead and give Tony the opportunity just to do some IT housekeeping. Tony, are you still there? There we
Yeah,
go.
I am. I've done 800 of these in the last 6 months. You'd think I'd remember to unmute myself. So it happens to everybody, folks. But real quick, just for those of you from the public that are here, since this is a webinar, if you would like to make a comment at some point in the agenda or to ask a question, what you have to do is raise your hand, and at the lower part of the screen in the middle, there's a raise hand button, and you can raise your hand. And then whenever there's a natural break, I'll mention to Yilda that somebody would like to ask a question or a comment, and we'll call on you. And at that point, you will have to unmute yourself. And then as normal, we'd love for you to give us your name and address for the record, and then you can ask your question and we'll move forward from there. So it's fairly easy to do if you can just find that raise hand button at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I'm going to try to run through the whole presentation and then take Q&A right at the end, leaving us probably about 30 minutes for questions or comments or general feedback. So I'm your presenter today. My name is Ilda Capricioso, and I'm the Park Development Manager with the City of New Braunfels Parks and Recreation Department. My email address and phone number up on the screen, so you can always reach me via email or at my direct line. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of the timeline. We've been working on this update since the summer of last year. We began working with Vickery and Associates. We then completed a draft report earlier this year and had been presenting some of that information and the progress of that to our Parks Board, which we ultimately went to their recommendation for approval in July. And then we subsequently went to various commissions and to City Council just to present the draft report to them so that we can then request approval from City Council later this year. And of course, our virtual Q&A that we're going through today is also on that timeline. So just to orient you very quickly, so if you're interested in seeing the report itself or downloading a copy of that and then visiting the Hike and Bike Trail interactive map, you'll visit the city's website at nbtexas.org and you can go to the Parks and Recreation Department. When you get to that page, you'll go to the Parks and Facilities and scroll over and this drop down will pop up and it'll take you to the Park and Planning link. Which will then bring you to the park planning page, and under the planning title you'll find a copy of the draft hike and bike trail report that is available for download, and then of course a link to the interactive map. So just to give you a point of reference of where you can find the information that I'm running through this evening. A little bit about the city's 2010 Hike and Bike Trail Plan. So this is a planning document that is used by Parks, Planning, and Engineering. It was adopted in 2010 as a part of the Park Master Plan. So it's commonly referred to in-house as in Chapter 10, the Trail Chapter. And then a couple years later, it was adopted as a part of the Regional Transportation Plan. And what's significant about that is the Regional Transportation Plan and being a part of that enables hike and bike trail projects or proposals to be eligible for state and federal MPO funding, Metropolitan Planning Organization funding. And those are state and federal transportation dollars that come to this region. And so having our trail plan as a part of that gives us more sources of potential revenue to fund either planning or construction for those proposed trails. Also want to point out that it's a pretty high-level view of the city's non-motorized transportation network, and it proposed what we refer to as on-street and off-street trails. And it ultimately produced this reference map that we utilize here at the city, and it shows you the existing hike and bike trail on and off street, the proposed and the existing. And so our effort was really to try and update this map as well as the content of that chapter into a standalone report. So before I go into the report, I also want to share with you some of the highlights that have been accomplished in the last 10 years since the development of the 2010 plan. And when we look at some of the projects here at the city, we look at our parks and recreation projects as well as some of the engineering and public work projects that have been completed. And in Parks and Recreation, one of our signature projects is the County Line Memorial Trail, which is a multi-use path. And then some of our neighborhood trails, we highlighted Fisher Park on here, but there are a number of other neighborhood trails that we've also included, as well as the Walnut Avenue Pocket Parks. And then under engineering and public works, we've had some additions of the multi-use path along Walnut and along Rickley, Morningside, and Solms. That's a current project that's going on right now, as well as the addition of a few miles of bike lane along Landa and Oak Run. The next few slides, I want to highlight some of the development that has also been responsible for helping some of these accomplishments in the 2010 Hike and Bike Trail Plan. So the first development that I want to highlight is located in partially in Park District 1, and this is the Veramendi development, and it's a very large master planned community, about 6,000 residential development. It's also going to include a really great regional park network as well as some linear parks and trails. And what's really interesting about the Veramendi is that they took the hike and bike trail requirements or the vision of that 2010 plan and really developed it into something that worked for their community and was much more extensive than was actually proposed in the 2010 plan. And so I want to just show you some pictures of what's been installed. So this is a 10-foot hike and bike trail that's going through, meandering some of the neighborhoods with a resting area with a table and a wonderful cluster of oak trees to the left of that. Throughout the Veramendi development, you'll see a number of striped bike lanes, and these bike lanes typically connect back to the neighborhoods and these 10-foot hike and bike trails. So they've really done a good job of integrating both on and off street components. And then as they get their parks online, they will have some of those nature trails as well. The next two developments that I wanted to share with you include smaller single-family home developments that had some hike and bike trail requirements, and how those hike and bike trails are kind of being laid out in those neighborhoods. The first one is August Fields. This is located in Park District 2. It's about 250 single family home. It's nestled between Fryhead Elementary and Canyon Middle Schools. And what's really interesting about this development is that we were able to work with the developer to not only install hike and bike trail connection, but also to dedicate 2 acres of public parkland. And so we're able to have a really great public park area that will be available to the public and anchor the hike and bike trail that's connecting the recent improvements in sidewalks along Alvis Lane to the recent improvements in sidewalks along FM 1101, and then be able to connect a lot of the retail area to the neighborhoods, both old and new in that area. So this first picture here just shows the installation of the park equipment during the construction period. And then as you pass that, there's this great lawn area, and then that connects you over to the hike and bike trail looking at Alvis Lane with the park behind us in 1101. The last development that I wanted to share with you is Wasser Ranch, and I didn't mention this, but in the August Fields development, that is a part of the Alligator Creek watershed, the Geronimo and Alligator Creek watershed. And what's, just kind of park that in your head for a little bit, that Wasser Ranch is also in the Geronimo and Alligator Creek watershed. So this watershed spans across 35. So August Fields is on the east side of 35 and Wasser Ranch is on the west side of 35. But this is also similarly sized development of about 300 homes. And they had They do have a park, but they did not dedicate it for public use. They kept it as their own private HOA. But what's really great about this hike and bike trail is that it also provides a connection to the elementary school that's nearby this neighborhood, and will also connect to an adjacent neighborhood that will also have hike and bike trail additions being added to it as it continues to develop as well. And so these are just some images of the hike and bike trail that was installed, kind of meandering through a little forested area. It meanders also through their 2 detention ponds that they have on site. They also included a resting area along the trail, and then it meanders back through and out to the roadway. And so also a great application for hike and bike trail and an accomplishment for the 2010 plan. So what is the goal of the update? So the main goal of the update was really to refresh this 10-year-old map with the completed projects and additional information that we knew about upcoming projects or upcoming efforts to get the hike and bike trail moving and advancing. As a result of that, we were able to do an inventory. You know, we had a general idea of how much bike lane we had, how much hike and bike trail had been installed, but we didn't have a good calculation of that. And so we needed to go through that exercise and effort. We also needed to create one reference point or reference guide for city staff to be able to use some best management practices or various standards for on-street and off-street hike and bike trails. And so we needed to make sure we utilized the standards that are being recognized across the country. And then finally, we also wanted to revisit the trail opportunities that had been identified in the 2010 plan and provide any additional information or updates to that, that set of opportunity areas. So the interim process, like I mentioned on the onset, we started this with a consulting firm, Vickery and Associates, and they really helped coordinate all of the information that was coming from our engineering department, our planning department, and parks, utilizing all the different plans that had transpired or been adopted over the last 10 years, as well as any projects that had been completed, or in particular, any of the development projects that also had hike and bike trail installed, and really collect all of that information, as well as collect information for the guidelines and really help us formulate all of that into a final report. We're able to fund this project with park development funds, and we also like to call this a very technical and desktop exercise. You know, it's taking a lot of the information that we had and stitching it together so that it can talk about trails and how those trail standards and trail inventory and all of that applies here in New Braunfels. So the report itself is divided up essentially into 3 sections. We talk about trail types, and the general design standards for those trail types. And I'm going to go into detail a little bit more about each of these in the next few slides. The trail inventory, which helped us update the maps both in the report, but really the maps that were in our GIS files and the interactive map that is available online. And then finally, the last section really talks about those opportunity areas and what additional information we could provide to help make those opportunity areas more relevant or more accurate in terms of where they stand for implementation. So the section of the report that talks about trail types and trail design standards really outlines all types of trails and bike facilities that could be used in an urban environment. So working with the consultant, we were able to look at the standards that are provided by USDOT, some of the legitimate and credible organizations such as NACTO and NRPA, and here comes the alphabet soup, because this is where all of these organizations have various guidelines and recommendations for how to install different types. And so we utilize that information in the narrative of that section to help us have guidelines for, you know, if we're going to do a trail in a greenway, this is what the standard typically is. Or if we're going to have a greenway and a floodway, this is what the standard typically is. And so it really just provides staff an opportunity to go to one single document in the city that says, okay, this is where we can start to look for a good standard for a particular type of trail. take a sip of water. And then once we went through those design standards, we were able to apply some of those standards to our existing network and really compare it to what we have on the ground. So applying those standards, this is just some images from the report, and we were able to go in and basically identify, what we thought were going to be some important off-street criteria as well as on-street criteria when it comes to bike lanes. And so we're able to look through here and be able to say, based on the types of trails that we have here in New Braunfels, the multi-use, the nature-based trails or the neighborhood trails, this is what we think we're going to need in order to be able to make something viable or to keep the standard across the city the same. And then we were also able to include in the report some of the standards that we've been using with Public Works and at parks and with the development community for the installation of concrete or non-permeable type pavement for Greenway in New Braunfels. So the next section talks a little bit more about the classification. So we were able to identify the types of trails that we have here in New Braunfels. And we're able to also be able to catalog how each of those trails match up with our park inventory as well. So the signature trail or signature multi-use trail is really that County Line Memorial Trail. Of course, the trails that I highlighted under planning and development at August Fields and Wasser Ranch are also really great examples of a multi-use greenway trail. Our neighborhood park trails, because this is a document that is utilized a lot in parks, we wanted to make sure that we inventoried our neighborhood parks. And over the last several years, we've been trying to add neighborhood trail parks. These are looped trails in a park, in a neighborhood park, like Torrey Park is a great example, Haymarket, Solms Park, and also Landa Park all contain a loop trail in the park. And so we wanted to make sure we captured that as people may park, bike, or walk to those neighborhood parks for these trails. And then finally, under the trail types, we also identified our nature trail, which includes, of course, Panther Canyon and the Dry Comal Trail. And so the report really goes through each of those and just highlights them and identifies them as those particular types. And then that is also applied to that criteria that I previously showed you. Bike facilities, in the report, we look at various types of a large spectrum of bike facilities that can range from the designated bike route that we do have here in New Braunfels to protected and separated bike lanes. But currently in New Braunfels, we only have the painted striped bike lanes and the designated bike routes. And so there may be opportunity in the future, depending on the project, to be able to include some higher classification of bike facilities. But as of right now, those are the two that we were able to categorize in New Braunfels. And so using that information, we were then able to take in a current or an accurate inventory of our on-street and off-street. And I should have put an asterisk on the trail inventory, but what is important to remember is that this is not continuous mileage. So one of the benefits of doing the update for staff, and I think for our public, is to be able to see where we've made some of these installations and where the gaps are. And I think that will help our community be able to identify areas of focus in addition to or in complement to the areas of opportunity. So like I mentioned, we took those classifications and then we went ahead and inventoried that, and we provide an inventory table for the report so that we have that available for people to look through. All of that information then helped us feed the updated maps that are available on the online GIS map. And we do have those maps available in the report itself, but again, those are static, and so I really would encourage you to go to the online version and have a look at the interactive map. It really gives you an opportunity to zoom in and zoom out, look at the imagery, and look at where things are relative to commercial or retail or school or any other types of facilities in in New Braunfels. Under the interactive map effort, we were able to update the GIS information. We were able to clean up some of the lines so that they were better aligned with new projects, the roadway, or other natural features like the river or the creeks. And then that helped us just improve our key, which has that existing on-street and off-street designation. And then finally, we were also able to add the opportunity areas. So in the previous 2010 plan, unless you had the full master plan in front of you, you weren't able to really see where those opportunity areas are, future areas of focus. And so we're hoping that just being able to showcase where those opportunity areas are, we're able to maybe do some future story mapping to talk about what we could have as trail connections or trailheads, and also help us identify areas for future master plans. So the opportunity areas that were identified in the 2010 plan are listed here. There are 8 of them. And in the update, what we did is we added more narrative to the recommendations that were proposed in 2010. We added information that either came from the 2017 Park Strategic Master Plan, whether there was any additional information about city ownership or a development activity, or possibly a bond or CIP project that might impact the opportunity areas. So these are in alphabetical order on this map, and in the report they're listed in a different order, but each of the areas provide information not just about the trail itself, but any reports that have been completed about it, what district it's in, what possible sources of funding it could be eligible for. And I also think it includes some information about the multimodal component of it. You know, maybe it's both off-street and on-street information. But again, all of these areas would require additional feasibility or master planning or visioning efforts. So what you have in front of you is essentially a screenshot of the online interactive map. And I'm going to finish out the presentation and take us over to that map. And then just kind of show you some of the general features of the map so that you have an opportunity to look at that at your own pace, or if you've got any questions about that. So I'm going to see if we can get online here. Okay, just want to make sure, can you all see my screen or no? Not yet, right? Okay. I think I have to move it over. Okay.
Yeah,
now,
no, yeah, there you go.
Okay. So, so from the screenshot, this is when you click on the link on the park planning page, you'll be taken to this interactive map here, and it automatically loads up. Oops. Automatically loads up the city limits, some base map information, and it includes both the proposed, or what we've labeled as proposed and existing hike and bike trail information. And what I'm gonna do very quickly is I'm going to take off the proposed because I just want everyone to be able to see. I took off existing. There we go. And one more. There we go. So you can see from the approved 2010 and 2012 hike and bike trail plan, all this GIS layer in black, and most of it is proposed. And so if we pull that layer off and you just look at the existing, you can see that we've done some installation all around town, and you can see where there are some good opportunities for connection or for future study to be able to make some improvements or provide some seamlessness. So I think this is a really helpful tool to be able to just see publicly what we've installed and what we would propose to do either off-street or on-street, for instance. So you're able to click that on and off and zoom into different areas to see where some of those opportunities may present themselves throughout. We're also able to pop over the parcel information just so you can see, you know, maybe where some of residential or commercial development is located. Our park districts, city council districts as well, if you're interested in that. Pop open the imagery. This might take a little bit to load up, but also show you some of the imagery as we get a little zoomed in here. And then I'm going to pop that off real quick. And then finally, I just wanted to also show you the opportunity areas that are highlighted here. We don't have these labeled on the map, and I think we may ask our GIS department to go ahead and label those. But each of those areas are just kind of highlighted in a red circle or square relative to each of the areas that are noted in the report itself. And what I like to often highlight with the opportunity areas, if you remember, I had mentioned Geronimo and Alligator Creek. That watershed extends across this area of the city here. And so that opportunity area is quite large. And so, you know, it might be an opportunity to look at just one side of that first versus the other side, something we're thinking about particularly in the West Alligator Creek area. And then the other item that I want to highlight is if you're not familiar with our park funding mechanism, park funds that are spent with parks and trails need to be spent within the park district that they serve. So if fees are collected in this blue area, they can only be spent in this blue area, and so on and so forth. Fees collected in this pink area can only be spent in this pink area. And so where there are some overlap between opportunity areas, or maybe some opportunity to do some fund sharing between the districts to help advance some of those projects or studies in the future. So it's also just a great way to visualize, you know, where potential connections can be as well. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation here and conclude and just say thank you very much for letting me talk for 30 minutes about Hike and Bike Trail. I'm available to answer any questions. Want to point out that we are taking feedback, comments, questions for a week from now until September 24th, trying to collectively gather that information so that we can prepare it in a summary document for the report itself. So happy to answer any questions this evening or later this week. Tony,
So again,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll remind everybody again that if you would like to ask a question of staff, you can hit the raise hand button at the bottom of the Zoom application, and we will call on you and enable your ability to ask questions. And Ilda, I guess it's a function of how thorough you are, because nobody has raised their hand.
Wonderful. Well, or maybe they're waiting to just email me later. Or call me,
yeah, there you go.
Which they can do as well. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Here we go. We have a Les Shepherd.
Okay.
So.
Hi, Les.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Great. Hey, I didn't ever want to miss an opportunity to ask a question. And I just wanted to tell you, firstly, great presentation, very informative. Most importantly, though, I wanted to recognize this interactive map because it is such a terrific tool. It provides, it's great for education. It's great for communication, provides great clarity on where you've been. And I think most importantly, it helps tell a compelling story for where we all would like to go, depending on where we live. I'm curious, what would you say would be the 2 or 3 most important things that we as a community of interest can do to help you in your office to move this agenda forward in a meaningful way?
That's a great question. Thanks so much for the positive feedback. I appreciate that. I think, you know, as residents here in New Braunfels, you know, your best venue for communicating support is always going to be through your council person, and sharing with them that, you know, the report has been helpful, the interactive map is helpful. So I think that's one great way for residents to continue to support if that's how they want to do that. I think there are also some great organizations in town that do a lot of our outreach and communication effort about trails. I'll give a shout out to our Trails Alliance. They're always doing such a great job continuing to participate in any of their volunteer activities. I know with the current circumstances, it's been challenging for a lot of organizations to do things collectively, but they're a great organization to learn from and to get a good feel for various projects or initiatives that they've been supporting through the city's work.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
All right, if there are any other members of the public who would like to ask a question of staff, please hit the raise hand button. Okay, we have a Gloria Glass, not Class. Ms. Glass, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, all these trails, they're available for everybody, for the public, or some of them private?
The trails that are available, that are highlighted in the report, are public trails. So yes, they are available for anyone living, visiting, or working in New Braunfels to access.
Okay, thank you. You've done a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you.
All right, is there anybody else out there who would like to ask a question? All right, well, Ilda, at this point, those are the only hands that have been raised.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. I know people probably have exciting things going on this evening, but I am available via email at ycapricioso@nbtexas.org, or you can reach me at local area code 830-221-4358 for any follow-up comments or questions. Thank you again. Tony, thank you also for your help.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you all for being here.